Okay, boys and girls, we're live. Silence? What? You guys were pretty chatty a minute ago.
Yes, we were.
Holy fuck. Did you see what I saw?
We're not in the same part of the country. I don't think I did.
No. Fuck. Did you see what I saw? Oh my god, somebody's...
We're not in the same part of the country. I don't think I did. There we go. I always do that.
Yeah, I learned to mute my site. Now you got to learn that trick too. That's
I know. Maybe in a few years I'll remember.
Okay, but now I'm about to fuck up and unmute it. But anyway, it's kind of early for this, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of early for that, isn't it? We just went live 30 seconds.
Oh, no, I mean, there was no waiting.
Fuck.
Barely any lag.
Usually we get about 20 minutes, you know. I gave you Benny Otadlo. I don't know if the song came through very well.
I think he noticed it.
Oh, okay.
He's just trolling us in the chat. Looks like just repeating the same thing.
I know. I know he's going to tell us about cakes. Tell us about cakes again, Otadlo.
You have a recipe for a cake. That means you have a great baker up in the sky.
I forgot how cakes work.
My favorite song is Baker Street. Great song from the 70s.
So anyway,
that big trumpet solo.
So you think that
go ahead.
Creationists and intelligent designers are just like the flat earthers that won't understand just anything. They want to believe what they want to believe.
They don't listen, and they see it all in a certain way, and it's really. And I thought. Okay, so what happened is James Tour put out a video, right? Was that yesterday? Like 18 hours ago. Basically firing back at Professor Dave. And he kept calling him Dave something or another, kept using his last name, which I thought was pretty jerky.
Yeah, it's just kind of shitty, passive-aggressive behavior. You know?
Yeah. And then he said he's not a real professor. Well, he's a teacher. And I don't know what Dave's degrees are. He's got a degree in chemistry and whatever, and he's a hell of an educator. And to James Tour's credit, he did mention that. Well, he did that passive aggressively too. He said, "Professor Dave, I understand he puts out a lot of educational content. I haven't watched any of that, but I hear it's good." Yeah. Something like that, right? So James Tour does that thing, and then Standing for Truth did a little fireback thing with Dr. Ryan Hayes and Dr. James Carter. Are we going to, should we call Dr. 11th Dimension and Dr. Molecular Alchemy? Should we start doing that in every video?
Calling Dr. Alchemy. Dr.
Alchemy, yeah. Anyway, so then Tour went on and he did this long thing, Professor Dave attacking him on his religion. But that is exactly where James Tour needs to be attacked, because he believes he saw Jesus in his bedroom. And he has this like strong Christian bias. And there's some other things about James Tour that I found out just recently. He wanted to be a state trooper. And if you look at his face and his demeanor, you can see why he would be attracted to the police force. He'd be one of those guys. He'd be one of those. What the fuck was that? I won't even try to remember things from the past today. But anyway, that Dragnet. You remember Dragnet? Did you ever see clips from that stupid?
Oh yeah,
from the 60s.
Used to love Dragnet after school.
Yeah, that guy on Dragnet, he was like really into the police, and he wanted to be a cop. I think he may have been a cop at one point.
Talking about Jack Webb?
Jack Webb, yeah. And he was, and he looked like James Tour. I mean, they had the same look and the same demeanor, Anyway, so Tour was, mad because Professor Dave basically did ad hom attacks, right? And didn't attack his argument.
No, that's not true.
He did a lot more than that. Yeah, that's a fact. But
there were some very fine facts and logic in that video. If he's talking about that one video, if there's something else going on, I don't know. But
no, but Professor Dave did address the fact that he's got this, sort of heavy bias,
right.
And so he did this slide here. Here. What the fuck? God, StreamYard is bad. And I upped the amount. I changed my plan for StreamYard today. I made StreamYard. I'm doing the super premium plan right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I shouldn't have because they suck.
Super premium, not just premium, but super premium. All these adjectives.
Well, it gives you, I think, more bandwidth, and I wanted to see if it made a difference in the quality of the videos and the quality of the sound we're getting. But it's like twice as expensive, and I'm not sure if I really want to stick with that. So we got an Otangelo here. Okay, Otangelo, we got to behave today. Okay, so we got things to do. But anyway, so here's what James Tour puts out, right? This is his criticism. Whatever the conditions were of a prebiotic Earth, it did not consist of a pristine laboratory. There were no fine chemical producers wherein one could purchase the starting materials or the reagents or buffers. Now, you can read this, but this whole thing kind of implies the way he thinks and the way Otangelo thinks, that that you had to have this pristine lab and you had to have these perfect, because James Tour is coming at this from the angle of a synthetic chemist, of which he is a premier synthetic chemist, of some renown.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all he fucking is. He is in no way an abiogenesis researcher, because he doesn't have the mindset for it, and he has a worldview that precludes it right automatically. And he won't admit that, but he does. You can see it in all the stuff he does. But he's going on here talking about, you have to have the homochiral amino acids and all that stuff. And it's like everything has to be pure and laboratory grade in order to make life happen, because that's how we research abiogenesis. Now, this is a misunderstanding that we are not able to get across to Christians, no matter how hard we try. We can't get, and this is where the pudding thing came from with Anthony Maurice. I asked Anthony Maurice, do you think the fucking prebiotic Earth was pudding? And it's like, no, it wasn't pudding. It was wet, dry cycles, heat, cold cycles. It was like millions of little micro test tubes laying all over the Earth, quadrillions of them, going through all sorts of phases and cycles, from acidic to alkaline. And he mentions a Cannizzaro reaction that if you have a real alkaline environment, it breaks down the prebiotic chemicals. Well, there was a little of both going on in the air, mostly acidic ocean, so that would not happen. And the fact that the molecules have a half-life and they do break down, that still doesn't make a difference. Half-life means they stick around for a while. Some of them stick
plus,
around.
there's that old Lay's potato chip slogan. Did you run out? Well, we'll make more.
Yeah. So anyway, this is and that's about all the analysis that I did. I don't have a lot prepared on this. I just started looking at it all. Do you think it's? I know you looked at it a little bit, Scott, and you had some stuff in the transcript. Did you want to share the?
That was from their Dr. Carter, well, I can't remember. Is it Dr. Ryan, or was his first name Ryan?
Ryan Hayes and Dr.
Yeah, it wasn't about James Tours, as far as I know.
Oh, I thought that was this. Oh,
no, it was a discussion between those two about abiogenesis. It's a part one.
No, Maddox has had a stream up where he was waiting to have a live stream on the back of the James Tour thing, except he got stuck in like ice for 12 hours in his car the other day.
There in Tennessee. Wow, yeah. It's just everywhere, isn't it? It's just hitting the South hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
But that happens, it just cycles through,
I'm worried about
stories to tell your kids.
I'm worried about my brother and his wife. They had to move out of one house, their house, and into another. Now they have another power failure, and I don't know where they're going to go next. And those, I think those two just had their first shot. So going to a community center.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's not good for 80-year-olds, you know?
Well, guess when I was due for my second vaccination? Today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they sent me a text saying, well, we were going to have you come in, but we're closed.
Yeah.
So I went, oh, well, perfect timing.
Yeah. So he's got Maddox has an upcoming show. I know
they did an after show. I think Otangelo is in there as well as Maddox after the, they call it the 2 PhD something.
Oh, he did an after show on that?
Yeah, but I haven't watched it.
I don't see that after show. Where the hell is that?
It wasn't on Standing's channel. It might have been on Sal's. I think it was Sal. Of course, Otangelo's here. He could tell us.
Yeah. I don't know what show you're talking about.
We're talking about, like, John Maddox was going to do this comeback on after James Tour's video. He was going to do an after show, but he took the video down. Huh?
Yesterday night or 2 days ago? I think it was.
He was going to do it 2 days. He was going to do it 2 days ago. Then he got stuck in ice.
Yes, I know.
And then I thought he was going to do it again last night, but then he didn't. No, he was too tired last night, so I thought he was going to do it tonight. But now it looks like he took the video down.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know if he's going to do it at all. So he's probably. So what happened to him? He was like stuck in his car for 15 hours.
Yeah, I heard something like that.
Yeah, like stuck in ice. I mean, that would be a challenge. I mean, you could die from that shit because you can't run your car for 15 hours. I guess you can warm it up and shut it off and warm it up and shut it off. But I mean,
it's the blizzard of 78.
Yeah, it's you can get hurt in blizzards. I was when I was like I don't know, 19, 20 years old, I was working at Erie Mining Company. It's a taconite plant where they make taconite. And I had a 45-ton Euclid, and I was out fucking around doing shit hooks with that thing. It's a giant ore truck. I mean, if you could imagine. I was like doing, spins with it, having fun. Anyway, I got stuck out in the middle of a snowstorm in the middle of the night when it was 45 below. In the middle of an ore field, basically they had these huge, like a gigantic, imagine a parking lot of, half a mile long. I was out in the middle of that and I got stuck and I had to walk to get warm. And I was walking for like 5 minutes and my lungs started to freeze and I couldn't breathe. And so I had to bury myself in the snow and warm up for like 15 minutes and then go another, block and then do it again. And it took me about an hour. And I had to be very careful not to panic because if I'd started running, I would have died. And it's like, you can die in the cold. And I found that out that night. That was interesting. But I mean, it's amazing when you feel your lungs freezing and you can't breathe because the water's building up in your lungs. And like, I think, and you start coughing. It's really weird. I don't know. Anyway, one of my fucking stories, as my ex-wife would say.
That's a good story.
Anyway. Okay. So, yeah, we don't know much else unless you got some stuff in that transcript you wanted to go over.
No, I haven't really done it justice yet. I wanted to go through and highlight the main things. With a transcript of speech, of people talking, there's a lot of filler and a lot of uhs and ahs you have to get through to figure out what the main points are and stuff.
Yep, and we're not done with that cell video either.
That's true.
Yeah, but the Say Bio stuff. It takes a lot of work to get into that field, to start researching it, and I don't know. I didn't, like 3 months ago. Or 6 months ago. I didn't think that was the direction we were going to take. But that's kind of the direction you creationists have taken. So we got to kind of follow your lead, I guess. Because you want to concentrate on abio instead of evolution.
Well, it's very fascinating stuff anyway.
Yeah, it is.
Imagining what it was like in a prebiotic Earth before there was even oxygen in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Well, speed. what are you saying? If a creationist jumped off a bridge, you would do that too?
Basically. Good point. Botanical repellent. Okay, so what was I going to say? Oh, Decil Grace. We got to talk because I read that paper, and now I'm looking at the book Extended Synthesis by Pigliucci and Muller, and there's a whole lot of interesting stuff in this book and in that paper about neutral theory and a number of other things. But we do have to talk. And I know you're
Steve,
on that. What's that? Check
the private chat. There's a link to Sal's after show after show for James Tours. That James Tour feature, as well as the James Carter and Ryan Hayes show they did. And that's not Danny, is it? No, there's a mustache. Never mind. But anyway, so that might be interesting to look at. If you can get me the transcript after you put it through your transcriptonator.
Okay, good enough. I will do that.
Is that what you named it? The transcriptonator?
Yep, transcriptonator.
You'll right. Sell 1 million of them with that name.
2 PhD SFT after show, that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, this one. So, who were you on with? Who stopped in? Oh, is that Danny?
Scott said the same thing, and then he decided no, it wasn't. Danny.
No, okay, that's
Angelo, were y'all on with Danny last night?
No, his name is Gene or John.
Oh, okay, all right.
I heard you call him John Otangelo. So who is he, Otangelo? John or Gene?
He's a French. He's a French guy, but I don't know his background.
Okay. But was he knowledgeable?
He didn't say much, so I don't know.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, this is all worth looking at. Let's see if we get a transcript. We got a transcript on that one? Yep, we do. Got a transcript. Oh, boy. Transcript's your worst nightmare, Otangelo. Means I can track you guys. Yeah, I can track you guys. I'm going to put it into my transcriptonator.
Yeah, what is that?
The transcriptonator, I wrote a little Ruby program. If you copy this into oh, fuck. God damn it. Come on.
You Control A, it would highlight it all.
It highlights a whole damn page sometimes.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's what I don't want to do. Okay. So
Shift End, maybe you can do it.
Okay, if you copy this into a Word doc, it'll be about 150 pages long. Put it into my transcriptonator, and I collapse every 3 minutes, I think. I collapse the timestamps. So, fairly handy tool, I think. About 10 lines of Ruby code, which is a very powerful language.
So you're basically finding lines of just spaces and yanking them out, and then yanking anything in the format of a timestamp?
Well, I grab a timestamp, and then I will count 3 minutes and keep grabbing just the text and getting rid of the line with just digits in it. Uh-huh. And then I just and I append them with a space so that it does one paragraph instead of every line, that sort of thing. And then I read out a line. And
Angelo, Jerry Penn is asking in the chat, like, when we hear kids in your background, are you a father or a grandfather?
No, I'm a father.
Oh, okay.
Wait till you're a grandfather, man. It's worth it. It's worth every tear, every late night you ever worked.
Yeah, I have just one daughter. She's 7 years old.
Yeah, it'll be a while. But at least you'll have somebody to make goo-goo eyes at you in your old age when you have a grandchild.
If you lived in the South in America, it wouldn't be that long.
Now.
I got to tell you, you're always jumping on me speed, and something similar came to my mind, and I edited that shit out. Like, you're the one that said it. Like,
well, his frontal lobe's probably getting a little too old, and
it's getting a little
filled with hardening of the arteries or something.
Well, yeah, the first thing that breaks down is the filter. You know, the filters that kind of shit out. I kid the South. You know, I mean, I'm a northern boy, and anyway, okay, I got the transcript for this one. I'll just have to. I'm distracted, so I don't know. Let's just open this up. You guys talk about whatever the hell you want. What do you want?
I thought you were gonna watch this video.
Huh? Oh, you want to watch? Well, we don't know what to watch. Otangelo, is there a part we should watch?
Well, mostly it was.
Your mic is breaking up.
The topoisomerase, and it's quite technical. So I don't know if you guys are interested in what he was explaining there. It's up to you.
We don't understand big words like topoisomerase. We're kind of, we're not really equipped.
Its function. If you look, the GIF image is how it works. It's fantastic how it cuts the DNA, and then the DNA goes through, and then it fixes DNA again. It's mechanistically speaking really amazing.
Oh yeah, he said some really unbelievable things about cell data, about how many histone modifications happen, and how fewer happen in bacteria or something like that. I don't know. I was not impressed with.
I mean, you require for life to start that isomerase is there to how can I say in English, to disentangle DNA. It's required. It's necessary, and if you see its specific function, how it does it, it's amazing. I mean, I have an article on that at my library, and it's just mind-blowing, I would say. It's really an interesting protein.
Is it all natural, though?
Sorry?
Is it all natural? That nature does it by itself?
Well, I mean, you know my position, so why do you ask?
Well, I mean, I could see why you asked that, Otangelo, because your characterization, I mean, I'm a little confused myself about your characterization that it's mind-blowing. I don't understand how it would be mind-blowing from your worldview.
Well, maybe.
Wait a minute. I'm not done. Hold on 1 second. Wouldn't it be business as usual as far as your God belief goes?
I mean, at Saul's stream, he doesn't. I don't think he showed how topoisomerase actually works. But if you want, I can put it here. There's a GIF which I have here at my library, and it shows how it opens up, how it cuts DNA, and then one strand goes through the other, and then it fixes it again. And I think that the mechanistic sequence of its performance is really, it's nice. I mean, it's interesting, and you have to ask yourself, how could something like that goal-oriented emerge without intelligence?
Well, we don't think it's goal-oriented. We say, how can something like that emerge? That's what we do. So.
Well, the goal is, as I said, its purpose or its function is to disentangle DNA. And if you don't have that function when life starts, then you cannot have life. It's life essential. And I think in every science paper where they propose a minimal cell, you will see it mentioned.
So is it not what survived? It's the way that nature works because it survived.
There was no life yet.
Yeah, but topoisomerase wasn't needed in prebiotic life, basically early life. There was no topoisomerase, and
well, that's what I'm saying, that you require it. Otherwise, how do you disentangle DNA? It is required.
Well, I don't think DNA was quite involved when life first started. So that came a little bit later, maybe 100 million years.
I don't know of any life form speed which does not require or use DNA.
No current life forms, no.
Does it have?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
many-
okay, wait a minute, viruses.
Well, viruses are not alive.
Well, that's what you say. I say they're alive. They reproduce. They're alive. They're as alive as we are. I don't know.
Well, they
But
are.
it's not life.
They depend on life in order to.
No, it depends on
replicate.
how you. It depends on how you define life, right?
That's
I
like
mean-
saying we aren't life because we depend on crops. Like,
Yeah, because we depend on a ton of what are we, like 80% microbiome and about 20% human, something like that. We depend on a hell of a lot of shit to stay alive too. So getting into how you define life and what is life and what isn't life, it's better to say it's a continuum between rocks and us. And there's nowhere you can draw the dot to say this is where life began.
But we're never rocks.
Which is exactly the point of, was it Nicholson or no, the book that Nestle recommended to us.
Nick Wayne.
Nope, it's a different one. It's
Well,
where the hell is it? Oh my god, I don't know.
so you've been holding out on us with a title.
Yeah, well, no, I posted it earlier in one of. It's underneath.
Get Amazon ready.
Come on. It's underneath about 15 books. Just hang on a minute. You're okay. Nope, that's not it.
You're going to get an intervention for being a book hoarder.
yeah, you know what, Speed? You should just have an implant put in your head that when you think of a book, it checks and sees if you have it, and if it
And orders it from Amazon.
it just orders it.
Yeah, Amazon is coming out with that. They have one click now. They're going to have think click.
Thank click. Put it. Yeah, in fact, I've not had to really hit click since I got my my COVID vaccination. I think the chip just takes care of all of that. I just think about a book and it shows up. It's amazing.
Yeah. You think about which credit card to put it out.
Yeah,
on?
I've got my default.
Oh, you got a default credit card.
I've got a default card set up.
Yep.
So it's just like that episode on South Park where Alec Baldwin and Eric had that new thing planted in their head. It was called Shitter instead of Twitter.
I hadn't heard of that one.
And their thoughts just automatically got uploaded to the internet.
Oh fuck! Don't make me find that book. Nestle knows what it's called. Where's Nestle?
I don't think he's with us at the moment.
No, he's no longer with us.
I don't. You know what I mean. He's not with us in this stream event.
Well, there's a lot of senses you can use that phrase in. Like, he left the party. He's no longer with us. The cops came and picked him up. He's no longer with us.
I've actually kicked the bucket a few times.
Have you?
Yes, when I get mad, I'll kick a bucket.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I did that. Oh, I got another cool story about buckets. So when I was 20, when was I 22? 20 maybe. I don't know, 21. I bought a farm from my dad. And it had a big barn, and the barn was full of junk and scrap iron and stuff, that he had stored up there. And I had, I decided to clean the hayloft out of this barn so I could have dances up there. So I cleaned it, and I threw all the scrap out the back of the barn door, and it fell like maybe 15 feet into a pile of scrap. And my dad came over, and he was sitting having coffee and talking to me, and I said, Dad, I cleaned the hay barn up. I threw all that scrap out back, and all of a sudden his face went white, and he said, "What'd you do with the dynamite?" And I'm like, "What fucking dynamite?" He had a bucket of sweaty dynamite sticks. Sweaty sticks, sweaty nitroglycerin, and I threw it into a pile of scrap. It would have blown that barn right back onto the dirt road that we lived on, which was across the potato field. But he had like 20 sticks of dynamite in a bucket wrapped in rags, and I just, he didn't tell me about it. It's like, who does that? Like, there's this whole thing about real estate, when you sell real estate, you got to disclose certain things. Fucking dynamite's on that list.
Yeah. There's things you need to know about.
You need to disclose that shit.
At
Anyway.
least he didn't say, "What did you do with Aunt Joan?"
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
That's another story. I can't tell that one publicly.
No.
Yeah, we'll have to be offline for that one.
Yeah, I have to be offline for that one. Anyway. Oh, so what else up, guys? I got nothing today.
Well, just to mention when we got that plowback from Dr. Deemer.
Yeah.
That experiment that he did in the lab with the vials.
Yep, the wet dry things
around on that little plate and going through wet dry cycles. He said it was replicated by a young lady in a different lab in 2014. So it's been replicated, that particular, and then that paper, that essay that just got published. They went out to all the different hot springs again and replicated the lab results in situ in the field. So that's going to be an interesting essay to read after we get through the hypothesis paper. So they were making DNA in the lab, and they're making DNA in those hot spring pools.
Is that second paper that you gave me?
Yeah. When he said in 2014, I thought that has got to be in the hypothesis paper and the essay as well. And I went in and he cited those two studies, or that one study, in both the hypothesis paper and his essay.
Hey, when did that? I see people congratulating Ian last night. When did all that happen finally?
At about 4 or 5 o'clock yesterday. I think he said that I could share the pictures. So
Cute little girl.
I'm gonna dox the hell out of myself here probably. But oh shit. I got to download them because I don't want to share the text.
Yeah.
Let me work on that. You guys talk for a minute.
So I want to ask Otangelo, and I'm only halfway tongue in cheek asking this because are you really a person or are you a program?
Yeah, that's interesting.
What do you think, John?
Well, I mean, the reason I ask is because, I see something you just posted in the chat that, I've seen you repeat, hundreds of times. And it almost seems like you have these autonomic responses, when someone engages you.
Well, no, that's an interesting question because if God programmed you as information, as a program, aren't you just kind of a program?
Well, in your worldview, I think it would be justified actually to doubt about that. What doesn't say you that maybe everything around you is not just a simulation?
Oh, it could be.
Why would I think that? Because I would have to know something about a simulator in order to believe that. And then what if the simulator was simulated? And what if simulator...
But maybe they are invisible. You see them, you just see the simulation and they are hidden.
Well, yeah, it's a possibility, but there's a possibility that the simulator that simulated the simulator that simulated the simulator was also simulated. And where do you want to stop with possibility?
Well, there is an infinite possibility of possibilities. You cannot exclude anything, basically. Everything is possible.
So, anything could have happened. So it could have been, what is your pink fairies that are, have a bean problem? It could have been them.
Well,
what you're saying, Otangelo, is that your pink fairy theory is as good as Christianity. That's what you just
basically, Otangelo, what you're proposing is just a variation on the theme of solipsism.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, who tells you that we are not just a computer game of a kid playing on a computer in a parallel universe?
Where'd you get the information in real life?
Somebody's been watching Men in Black.
Okay, this is the Eonator ready to go into battle.
He looks pretty fierce there, you know.
He looks fierce. He is fierce.
I don't know if it inspires confidence as a physician or if he just inspires terror as of a serial killer.
Well, you know why he's so confident.
Here's the punchline.
He's not the one who has to squeeze a human being out of their uterus.
That's true.
Well, actually, she had it cut out. He was going into he had to watch surgery happen. So you gotta hand it to him. But here he is with Victoria. And he sent me like 500 pictures this morning. Because
really?
He can't keep his eyes off her.
I know. They're just, they're precious.
He's got a bunch of them. So no, he only sent me about 3-4 pictures. But he wanted to tell me. He wanted me to tell all you guys publicly that when he did his Kenthoven debate. Hang on a second here. Saturday night. Let's see. Oh. They also went into a 5-day lockdown, so he only gets to go to the hospital for like 2 hours a day or something.
Yeah.
But he wanted me to tell you that I think it was a coworker. Some guy left a complaint about him at his work to get him fired. Some Christian, because he did that Kenthoven debate. And I believe the response from Ian's company was, I think he said the CEO, I'm not sure, was, hey, what you do in your private life is your business.
Well, there you go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was apparently someone wrote to the CEO to complain about my offensive debate on YouTube. Luckily,
how offensive that was.
Okay. The human resources person said it was a call to let him know that there was a complaint, but what he does in his private life is not the company's business.
Oh, it is the CEO's office, he just said. So very cool. I'm glad you got a level-headed CEO.
You know, there was a similar
human resources.
There was a similar story in the community not too long ago that somebody had called their place where they work, and the boss was, just like, gave the person shit and said, yeah, like that's none of our business,
Right. Yeah. Anyway, that's pretty cool. I thought this was pretty neat.
Hey, what we were talking about a few minutes ago. Now it brought another question to mind: is, well, Tangelo, what if God's a simulation?
Yeah.
Well, you can basically believe whatever you want. The question is, where is the evidence?
Yeah, you can.
Sorry.
There is no evidence for God or any of this shit, like a simulator, none of that stuff. Why would anybody believe crazy stuff like that?
It's a philosophy.
I think
IP. I think it's IP. What is that guy? Inspired Philosophy. He put a video out maybe 3-4 years ago where he explained from his perspective why simulation theory proves God's existence.
Yeah.
And it was just, he is, I like him and he's very intelligent, but just some of the stuff he comes up with is just crazy.
The whole simulation theory stuff is just bullshit. So
yeah, I'm thinking I've saw the video on Sabina Hossenfelder. Sabina Hossenfelder's here we go, the simulation hypothesis. And I will share it in the public chat.
Oh, by the way, guys, on the screen right now is my youngest subscriber. Because when I was trying to make 100 subs, Ian actually went out and created an account for Victoria and signed her up. So she was actually signed up like 3 months before she was born. That's one of my subs. So
what a legacy!
That is a legacy, right? Yep. So
that's not consensual.
Oh no, top dog! Don't go there.
Well, yeah, I was going to say you can blame the simulation argument on physicists and computer scientists, as they're the ones that came up with it.
Yeah, and it just struck me as kind of like a stretch, a real stretch.
I don't see it as a stretch necessarily. I mean, it's an interesting argument. It's just you can't refute it definitionally.
I know, but then
Because if it was a simulation and you were inside the simulation, there's no way you could show that. Like,
yeah, but to be fair, Immutable, you were persuaded by Danny's anti-naturalism argument, so
I didn't say I was persuaded. I said it was valid.
it can't be valid unless you render it in terms of mathematical logic, my friend. You can't just say,
And
"Oh,
it
it's
checks
valid."
out. Show me
No,
where it
it-
doesn't check out.
is it valid or is it valid but not sound?
Okay, on one thing, he had physical as a predicate, and he was saying the mind is physical. So the mind is predicated to be physical. In the next stage, he had something is predicated to be mind. So he made that crossover, and he didn't make any connection with it. So it's not valid. It's not a valid logical argument.
You
until
can't
you
have
fill
old
that
people
stuff.
try and recite arguments I give.
Okay. You wrote it down, and I turned some of it into predicate logic, and immediately I ran afoul of you guys like switching
You want me
from
to-
fucking predicate to subject.
You want me to write it down in propositional form in term like in the private chat?
Yeah, go ahead, go for it. Fucking throw it out there. Valid argument.
I mean, is it a valid argument like the same way that classic example from philosophy about the moon being made of green cheese? Like where it's valid, but it's not.
Yeah, it might be valid like that, but I'd have to see it actually fleshed out in terms of symbolic logic in order to determine validity. You can't just look at an argument and say, "Oh, that's valid." You got to fucking actually work that shit out with symbols and logic, mathematics.
Well, yeah, I mean, but
Yeah,
mean,
because-
valid only goes to form. It can be
Yeah.
valid and unsound. I mean,
Yeah, you can look at real simple arguments and you can tell that they're valid because you can do it in your head. You can convert it to symbols. But when it comes to what Danny Weenie is talking about, it's a little more complicated because he's using predicate logic. And I've never been a fan of those kind of arguments. But Immutable is going to show me. Oh, I'm waiting. What's happening? So people have been posting stuff in private chat.
Yep, lots of stuff going on there. It's very busy.
We got reasons in Cat's board, and we got a couple of videos.
It's very busy.
Oh my God! What am I doing? Is that me?
It's what you.
I don't know.
what does this mean, Otangelo? Machines that make machines that make machines. What is that in response? What is that regarding?
I put it in the private chat speed.
Otangelo, you here?
He might be looking after something real quick, so he probably can't hear you.
You just muted.
Oh, yes.
Wait,
Okay. So,
I don't understand.
yeah,
What
I'll
is this?
explain it.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I explain it to you. Let's suppose you have a circle, okay, and it's like a 12-hour. At each position of an hour, there is a factory, okay, and the first factory at the number one makes the subparts of the factory of number two, and the factory of number two makes the subparts of the factory number three, and you go all along until to the factory number 12, and the factory at number 12 makes the subunits of the factory number one. It's like a circle. You need every factory to make the parts of the other factory, and now you have to ask yourself, how could such a circle start?
I mean,
That's
aren't you just describing an assembly line?
Yes. That's basically what I'm describing in the article in the link in the private chat. And
This could have been smaller.
that's the situation of the ribosome, basically.
Yep.
Just could have been a smaller circle. So
Show. Okay.
I'd like to see where articles make anything near the type of analogy and the conclusions that are drawn from that analogy.
What?
I'd like to see where the articles support that kind of proposition.
Well, read it and then you will understand.
Well, I'm asking for like actual like research that's been done in terms of like the phylogeny of the ribosome and more basal ribosomes.
Well, if you understand how the ribosome is assembled and the biogenesis of the ribosome, then you will actually understand.
Your argument is concerning the parts of the ribosome and how you can't remove one part of the ribosome without getting the rest, right?
I'll put
So
it here in the
appropriate question,
chat what I'm talking about.
and
You
so
can read
the
it here.
appropriate the appropriate question then is to see whether or not the articles in the scientific literature actually support that kind of position, or if they don't.
Well, can you not think for yourself, Immutable?
Well, you're the one making the claim, Otangelo.
Well, and you already said something which is completely irrelevant to what I am saying, which is actually what I learned and what is supported by the science papers which I have studied.
Which is? I mean, go ahead and highlight it.
Yeah, you already criticized something which you don't even understand what I am talking about.
You refuse to tell me what that thing is, and you
No,
refuse.
I mean, you didn't even give me time. You didn't even give me time to explain what I am talking about. So
You died out, Otangelo.
I got to step away for a minute and go take some drugs.
Okay.
Yeah, Otangelo, it's always problematic to me when you say the scientific papers I've studied, because there's many examples from the stream where other people in the room have shown you where you read the paper wrong, or you took, some phrase or claim in the paper wrong. So because
they said that you believe what they said, John, why don't you investigate for yourself?
Well,
I myself one time brought a paper up that you were claiming some exponential figure from, and claiming it was in regards to something that it was completely not in regards to. I brought the paper up and saw it right off the bat, and then a few other people more scientifically minded than me found some other things that you misrepresented from that paper.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. If you know, then show it again. Then we
you
can
actually
talk about
rage quit. You rage quit that stream because many said to you, you wanted to move on to another subject. And then many said, well, no, admit that you were wrong about this.
Well, if you don't remember what it is exactly, what's the point to talk about this now?
Well, I only brought it up to say that you had pointed out to Immutable that he didn't understand what you were talking about, and that that what you were claiming came from the scientific papers you had studied. And I was just pointing out that's always problematic when you point to something like that, because you've been shown to be wrong in your interpretation of scientific papers on many occasions on this channel.
Have I?
The thing is,
I'm not aware of it.
As you have a very short memory.
I don't need to. I know, as Otangelo doesn't seem.
Okay, Immutable. So, just a simple question: can you give me an example where the ribosome is not involved in the synthesis or in the translation of the subunits to make another ribosome?
Otangelo, we're talking about the ribosomal subunits and whether or not the ribosomal subunits can be simplified into simpler and more basal parts that can still preserve the function of the ribosome. Unlike the clock analogy you just gave. That question has nothing to do with us.
Well, the thing, Immutable, is that we require chaperone proteins. The name is SHQ1, and these are involved in the making of SCA RNAs.
Okay.
And these SCA RNAs, they are involved in the making of SNO RNAs. Okay.
Okay.
And these SNO RNAs, they are involved in the maturation of the subunits of the ribosomal RNAs.
Okay.
So you need all these to make the subunits of the ribosome. And
Okay,
the ribosome is the one which makes all these SNO RNAs.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so it is a circle.
okay, but so the thing is, right, when you're talking about RNAs of any kind, right, RNAs are inherently are ribosomally derived gene products, right? What you're talking about in terms of these different species of RNA, right, is that they're all required to produce various subunits of the ribosome. And my question is, okay, yes, I can accept that. Now, the fundamental question still stands that if you were to take away a particular subunit of the ribosome, does the ribosome still preserve its function? And that is the question.
Craig Venter has said and confirmed that you have a minimal number, if I am not wrong, about 53 proteins and 3 ribosomal RNAs to preserve its function. And if you go lower than that, then you won't have any function. And we are talking just about the ribosome, not all the accessory proteins like tRNAs, the
Okay,
amino
so
acid,
I
tRNA,
can
and so forth.
take that figure. So 53 and 3, that's 56. Let's round it up to a nice number, 60, for instance, for sake of argument. Right? Even small organisms that have small genomes usually have 15,000 to 20,000 genes, right? 60 is a very, very small number in comparison to the rest of gene derived products.
Well, what you need is a minimal number of subunits to have a functional ribosome and the accessory proteins. And if you go lower than that, you have no function. And
Sure, don't
we are
disagree.
talking here about the most complex protein complex known. And the assembly requires at least 500 different assembly factors and complex machines and proteins. How do you explain the origin of these if there was no evolution? Because the ribosome is life essential.
Okay, so the question I'm asking, right, is that you said you're describing the most complex one. I'm asking from various phylogenetic studies or other molecular biology studies or what have you, what is the simplest known example of the ribosome that we know of? What
Yes,
is its
I
most
just
basal
told you. Take the simplest one. You said 60 proteins and ribosomal RNAs. Okay, so how do you assemble that without guidance and without intelligence?
I'd imagine they assemble partially on their own.
Is that an explanation?
If they assemble on their own, you don't need anything else. If
That's
RNA
just an
strands have
assertion.
inherent,
That's just an assertion, immutable. Where is your evidence that a 3D printer, which the ribosome is, can assemble by its own without guidance?
so
You just made an assertion earlier. You asserted that it cannot form without X. Basically, that is an assertion. You don't know that.
You are aware that the secondary and tertiary structures that ribosomes take on, right, is a property derived from the primary sequence of nucleotides and the secondary sequence.
So
Right.
what?
So once
So
you
what?
sequence, so when you have a sequence and you allow it to be exposed to some aqueous solvent, in this case water, that thing will fold into a very complicated structure. And it does so according to specific rules. And it will form certain hairpin loops and all those nice little fun things that ribosomes have within them, because they're trying to preserve Watson base pairing, and they are also participating in coordination with metals.
So what happens if you don't have chaperones?
If you don't have chaperones, then some proteins won't fold.
Yeah,
You don't
that's a
need.
problem.
Wait a minute. Wait. There are a lot of proteins fold without chaperones. 25% of all proteins don't need to fold, and there's a whole bunch of proteins that fold in a number of different ways without a chaperone, and they form functional folded proteins. So a chaperone is not necessary except for some certain proteins, and some of the chaperones, like the heat shock chaperones, are just a big bag, which will take any protein and give it time to fold, and that can be done in many other ways. So I mean, that is a real rich field that you can't just make some, oh, you need a chaperone or you can't have a protein. That is simply false.
The other
Tim,
thing,
how many chaperones do you think are used in all proteins in order to help the proteins to fold correctly in percent?
Modern cells?
I
thought you were talking about abiogenesis. Now you're going to talk about modern cells?
Well, whatever. You can take even abiogenesis. Let's suppose you have a minimal number of let's suppose 500 proteins or so. How many do you think would require chaperones in order to fold properly?
To fold properly in a modern cell?
No, let's. Do you think no chaperones were required at all, even in a simplest life form?
In the
when life started?
Well, let's see. What is that? That minimal bacteria. What is the name of that? What is that species?
Well, I say Pelagibacter ubique, which has about 1,300 potential, but you can take even a Mycoplasma, which has about 500, whatever. Do you think they didn't use or require any chaperones at all?
Yeah, there are some prokaryotes. I would guess. I don't know this. I'm going to have to look it up. That would not require chaperones to fold proteins.
Well, let me ask a Tangelo question that kind of hints at my answer, and this is a guess, right? This is a place where, I have to give my best information based upon my existing span of knowledge. Tangelo, to your knowledge, right? One of the defining differentiating marks or marks of demarcation between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells is that prokaryotic cells lack the presence of organelles, right?
Yes, there are some prokaryotes actually which even have organelles as well, but in generally, no, yes.
Right. So in general, that's not to say that there aren't exceptions to that rule, but so in general speaking, most prokaryotes do not possess internal organelles.
Yes, that's right.
For that reason, I would suspect that in modern cells, for instance, some of the post-translational modifications in folded proteins are acquired because of intracellular environments, like in the cytosol or in the nucleolar space and things like that. So I would imagine if you're dealing with the earliest type of life form, which would be a prokaryotic life form, if you did need the use of chaperone proteins or proteins related to chaperone proteins, they would be very small. They might occupy, 0.5% to 1% of the genome. And that's mostly because prokaryotic cells are very messy. They don't have intracellular compartments to really organize cellular complexity in the same way eukaryotes do.
Can I point something out real quick?
Sure.
You said that there are exceptions to the rules.
Yeah, there's exceptions.
Well, then, as Danny said, then it can't be natural.
I know it's like science, isn't perfect in terms of the laws that are described.
Okay, whatever.
Mycoplasma
apparently doesn't have these chaperones, and there are some. I got to check a little further, but just a quick search, and there's a problem with these very, very small prokaryotes having chaperones. So, have you checked with Angela? Have you got out and looked?
No, but you would probably have to look.
Wait! You didn't look?
No, in prokaryotes, I didn't.
So you just made an assertion, and you didn't try to back it up by.
Well, though, I have to ask the following question, and this one is really significant.
We're getting an echo now.
It's probably because I don't know. But Atangelo, do you think that the origin of life, assuming everything works with it, and that's a big if, I'll grant that to you. But do you think the type of life form that would be the result of it would be most likely akin to a eukaryote or a prokaryote?
Well, we know there is no relationship between eukaryotes and prokaryotes, and you know that I don't believe that the common ancestry hypothesis is true, that all life forms have the three domains, that they started with one universal common ancestor. I think the evidence doesn't point to that. But of course,
I'm asking strictly hypothetically.
Yeah, but no, there are good reasons which I can expose anytime. But anyway, I think that if we should propose a most simple life form, then I would go, and I said that many times, with the free living bacteria, because Mycoplasma is a symbiont and depends on other organisms to have the amino acids. And Pelagibacter rubic is one of the very widespread bacteria. About 25% of the oceans, they are this kind of bacteria. And it's the smallest free living life form. It has about 1,300 proteins and about 1.3 million nucleotides. So this is, in my understanding, a good model to know what the threshold actually is between life and non-life.
Right, so the short answer is prokaryotic life.
So you think some extant organism is a really good example of prebiotic or the transition from geology to prebiotic life? You think that's a good example?
Well, what I am saying is that what we know is that Pelagibacter is the smallest life form. We do not have an example of any free living life form which is simpler than that bacteria. That's why I say that it would be a good model to study that topic.
That's it. They do use microplasma. They actually have another,
which is free living, that is, which can exist without being a host cell in another organism. Then I'm interested to know it, because I have researched this, and the smallest one which I have come up with is Pelagibacter. But if you have smaller one, that's interesting. If you can let me know, that I would like to know.
Hey, Top Dog, be careful, man.
It's Monosiga brevicollis, I think. I can put it in chat here, but I want to put it in public chat. That's one of the ones I use.
Whenever you guys are done with this, I've been wanting to ask for over 10 minutes now. I'd like to go and take a few minutes and discuss what Immutable had posted in the private chat, that he posted that argument for you, Speed.
Sure, we can go through that if you want to.
Yeah, because I'm a little confused by some of it.
Can somebody copy and repaste it in so I can see it?
It's
also I did have a question, Immutable. Wouldn't stromatolites, albeit being fossilized, be like one of the earliest instances of life on planet Earth?
Yes,
they are. Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
They wouldn't be they wouldn't be earlier than something like prokaryotic life, though.
Well, no, but wouldn't they be prokaryotic life?
Yeah, I think they're somewhat higher in complexity than prokaryotes, though. I could be wrong on that one.
All right, I just copied it and reposted it.
Well, you can't see it in private chat? Oh, you can't see private chat before you do it?
It was posted well before Leo got here, so he wanted it.
Yeah, I put it in predicate logic, but it didn't put the line feeds in. And, it on the surface, it looks valid, and I can see why Immutable is saying that. But I see issues with it.
Well, let me ask my question, because I don't understand some of it. But all physical objects have causal tendencies, parenthesized, being that they cannot fail. What does that mean? Physical objects cannot fail.
Something's caused to happen, so it has to happen because it has the sufficient conditions to make it happen. So it's sufficient to happen. So,
but why does that entail it cannot fail, though?
But he's talking about, you see, there's just all kinds of sleight of hand things going on here. Physical objects.
What are you talking about, sleight of hand? I defined a term.
Right, and I'm asking, as the idiot in the room, what does that mean, though? You're saying all physical
Right.
objects have causal tendencies, which I understand that part, but then
So-
the phrase in parentheses that's throwing me off, being that they cannot fail. I mean,
Right. So physical objects are bound by a type of normative law. So there exists some kind of cause and effect relationship between physical law in terms of physical law, and that physical object will always act in accordance with that physical law. And so as a result, it cannot fail to
basically you're saying it cannot fail to be what it is and to do what it does because
Right.
it's been okay. All right, now I get it. And then
This is called weenie logic, is what it is. This is weenie logic.
weenie logic.
Yeah,
Where does it go? Where does it go? A little clunky for you.
people who are wieners do this kind of logic. Okay, all physical objects.
Jesus Christ, man! You guys,
we're kind. What does Danny call us? Generous. We're generous to one another.
we're the hyenas.
Yeah, we're generous.
I mean, actually, I'm just curious. Immutable, did you come up with this argument while you were walking in the mall?
I listened to Danny's argument, and this is the closest thing I came up with to kind of simplify it.
See, I called him a wiener. I did not call him shit for brains, so that means I'm being generous.
Okay. So
you have to explain
hold on a minute before we go too far, because here's the other half of, now that you've explained that parenthetic statement in your first. Okay, so the mind can fail is number 3. Okay.
Yes.
So all right. So, but going by your first premise, all physical objects have causal tendencies. Okay, but I see, where you came up with your conclusion based on your premises, but how the mind can fail.
Right. So the mind can fail in the sense that minds, one of the properties of minds, for instance, is they have intentions. So, for instance, I have a cup of water in front of me. I can desire to reach out and grab that cup, right?
Okay.
But not reach it out far enough to actually achieve that desire of getting that cup in my hand.
Is that the mind failing or your depth perception?
Well, it's an aspect of the mind failing, right? I have a sufficient idea of what I'd like to do, right? And I attempt to do that thing. I attempt to execute that action, right? I have the causal capability to do so, right? But it can fail, right? This is something that, should be fairly obvious when we talk about minds. But the property of a mind being able to fail, if it's a physical object, or if the mind were a physical object, right, it shouldn't be the case that the mind can fail. So the fact that it does gives the statement of the fourth premise, which is that there
is a failure of fulfilling an intention. A failure to fulfill intention, is that really a failure of the mind, though?
Well, are desires things that are desires products of the mind, right? I mean, there are certain neural states which cause desires, meaning that when you have certain neural states, right, there exists a state of affairs that you want to actualize. Like in the case of getting a cup of water because I'm thirsty, right? The desire is to grab that cup of water so I can drink. So, I mean, I would say that desires is a property of the mind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with your conclusion, because I don't think that, like Leo has said many times when we've been on these type of subjects, okay, just because it's not substantive, it's not physical, it's not necessarily made of matter, doesn't make it
Just because it's not material doesn't mean it's not physical.
right.
Sure.
Right, yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you very much. I'm trying to find the way you said it, and that does it for me perfectly. I mean, so, and I know this isn't your conclusion, Mule. I mean, with the argument you've put here, but the whole idea that, okay, so the mind is not physical. So, and I know you're not doing this, but then, so therefore God, or, that's the whole.
I can see where somebody would do that. I mean, I don't take that radical of a conclusion with it, but
I say that. I said it's true. Because
Without
physical
evidence.
objects never transform themselves into mental states. We have never observed that. So why would someone take that stance?
We observe that all the time in the human brain.
In the human brain, we are talking about physical objects, not the brain.
A
The brain is a physical
can't-
object.
Wait a minute. A physical
Not
object
the
can't
brain.
come. Well,
Like hard,
wait a minute.
hard things
Okay,
outside
so wait a minute,
of the
I'm trying to
brain.
ask you. I'm trying to get. Hold on. I was trying to ask you to clarify. So you're saying that physical objects cannot become, what was the term you used? Brain state.
They cannot
Physical
become
objects
mental.
cannot produce mental states.
Okay,
Which
so
is
you're saying
false.
physical objects cannot produce mental states.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Explain computers.
yeah, I mean, but and the other thing is like,
They
okay,
have no
what
conscience.
does your brain do? What does your brain do when you see a physical object? It doesn't turn it into a mental state. When you perceive something with your eyes that's a physical object, and then the next time someone mentions that physical object, what happens to your mental state? Do you envision that physical object in your brain?
Okay, I have a syllogism on this. I put it here in the side chat, in the private side chat, and you guys can read it, or I can read it so everyone in the who is assisting can follow. I think I did read that some time ago. Consciousness englobes the mind, qualia intellectual activity, calculating, thinking, forming abstract ideas, imagination, introspection, cognition, memories, awareness, experiencing, intentions, free volition, free creation, invention, generation of information. It classifies, recognizes, and judges behavior, good and evil. It is aware of beauty and feels sensations and emotions. 2. Hard objects are never observed spontaneously to transform themselves into abstract ideas. To ascribe to the electrons in our brain the property to generate consciousness and not to ascribe the same property to the electrons moving in a bulb is in contradiction with quantum physics, which establishes that all electrons are equal and indistinguishable. That is, they have all exactly the same properties. The mind is to the brain what the pianist is to the piano. The former, the pianist, is not reducible to the latter, the piano. 3. Those are all fundamental, discrete, invisible, non-quantifiable qualities of substance which has a different identity from hard physical objects, matter and space. It is immaterial, and perception, understanding, and evaluation of things adds a quality beyond and absent from natural physical matter and states, and can therefore not be reduced to known physical principles. The mind cannot be an emergent property of the brain. Existing fundamentals, space-time, mass, charge, can't explain consciousness, which itself is something fundamental and essentially different than physical things. Therefore, dualism is true, and since the universe had a beginning, the mind precedes and exists beyond the universe, and that mind is God.
Okay, so
Okay,
Tangelo,
number one, there was a really bad syllogism.
Hold on, Leo.
because
Leo,
it
hold
was
on. I
way
started talking
too
first. Leo, I started
Actually,
talking first.
I
Leo,
did.
nobody can hear either of us because you won't be quiet. All right?
Why am I the one that has to be quiet?
Because I spoke first.
Actually,
Okay.
I did, but go
So,
ahead.
at any rate,
You guys are like two children
I'm
with
just trying to say
candy
one thing to a Tangelo. Tangelo, this is a perfect example of when you were talking to everybody in the room about, because you said you wanted to get better at your argument and syllogisms and all that. This is a perfect example of what I brought up. That was a paper. That wasn't a syllogism. I mean, I understood everything in it, and I understand where you're going with it, but that's not a syllogism.
Not at all. I couldn't figure out.
Paragraph long things are not premises. I mean, that's just not.
Premises tend to be condensed into like 1 to 2 form sentences.
Okay, I give you that. It's maybe a typical syllogism in a short form, but I think it is a logical argument. And if it's not, you can criticize it and I can reformulate it, no problem.
But the other thing that I wanted to say is that you mentioned electrons. Electrons are not what generates consciousness, because consciousness isn't just quantum physics. It's much, much more classical than that and much more broad. You have electrons moving in specific patterns and in specific ways. You have ions of certain atoms being transmitted. You have other chemicals involved. All of these things, neurotransmitters, hormones, all of these things. It's not just electricity.
Well,
okay, I got that from a physicist. His name is Marco Biagini, and I can put his link, and you guys can look it up.
So you got it from a physicist, but not a neuroscientist. Got it.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, what Leo says makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, that would be like saying that a computer is nothing but electricity. And there's a lot more going on a computer that uses electricity to transmit the information, but there's more going on there.
I mean, I think if you're trying to take the perspective of Tangelo described, which is, breaking everything down atom by atom, every electron by every electron, you're really missing the point of what consciousness is. Let's
here is the link to the information. I'll put it in the side chat as well. And Speed, if you want, you can make me mod and I can share the link with people in the side chat.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is that take a simpler example, like a fluid, like water in a river or whatever, right? You can conceive of water as being you can conceive water as a fluid as being kind of this inherent property of individual water molecules colliding and doing all sorts of very complicated interactions within a contained space. It's just very hard to do, and those interactions alone don't really seem to give you a complete picture of what water as a fluid instead of water as a molecule is actually doing. In the same way, the consciousness is much more about kind of a dynamical state. It seems much more to be about this continuity and flow and exchange of different electrical signals and various signaling pathways and gradients and exchange between electrochemical junctions, more so than it is just studying individual atoms and trying to reduce it in that kind of way. So I think if you're thinking about it from the perspective of, we're just going to study this one atom at a time, I don't think you really can come to a true appreciation of what consciousness is, because consciousness is more of an
emergent property.
Yes, and more so than that, consciousness is a dynamic property, right? It's something that it's not a Boolean state. It's not something that's just on or off. Various creatures and even humans show various levels of cognitive faculty and various degrees of how involved in a conscious state they can be. So trying to describe it in this kind of like atomistic sense seems rather futile. Instead, you should try to characterize it as being, a collection and symphony of different events that are contributing to an overall much more complicated phenomenon.
A good way to summarize it is, imagine a puzzle. You have a picture of, say, a horse on this 500-piece puzzle. That picture cannot be reduced to one piece of the puzzle or to even a collection of the pieces of the puzzle. You need all of those pieces in exactly the right pattern to get that emergent picture. That's what a puzzle is. That's what consciousness is to the brain.
Yeah, that's a decent way of summarizing it.
It's also worth mentioning that non-physicalist positions are practically unheard of in neuroscience. In fact, the two competing models for consciousness, the integrated information theory and the global workspace theory, are both physicalist models. So my question would be, why is it that there are practically no neuroscientists in the field today that don't accept physicalism? If it were false, if there's absolutely no way to quantify abstractions in the brain, and there is, we can reduce to sets of neurons where memories are stored. We can watch somebody smell a piece of chocolate, and we can watch the activity in the brain light up. We can change images on a computer screen to something that a person likes versus what somebody doesn't like, and we can see how the brain changes with that. So it's pretty much an established fact that consciousness is an emergent property of the brain.
Well, and more importantly, right, that certain physical inputs, like you were mentioning, if you show a person a movie of something that they like, you can resolve that in an fMRI scan or various different complicated procedures, and actually map out what interactions in the brain are changing, and those changes in electrochemical states actually do correspond with do have a correspondence in terms of a change in mental state.
Exactly. Like, we've actually watched that happen actively in a person. And just to answer Lena Powell's question, do you gentlemen claim that you know what consciousness is? Me? No. But I would claim that the neuroscientists who have been studying this for decades do know what it is. And I go off of what they say.
I have a question here too, like based on what you're talking about, which I admittedly know very little about how you can examine the brain while the brain is performing different functions and see the changes in the brain. It's like through some color, some type of color changes for however it is you're viewing the brain. Certain things light up. So what would happen in the brain, if anybody knows, like when someone is deep in prayer?
Same thing that happens when somebody's deep in meditation.
There is a guy.
Quite meditative.
There is a guy that studies that. I always forget his name. Let me go look at my library.
And here's the reason I asked that is like, would like the brain state when you're praying be similar to anything else, and tongue in cheek, like say when you're having sex or?
Yes, not sex, but like things like meditation.
Right.
That's
they're
very similar to meditation.
But I think they found that a whole, like if you're meditating or praying, that a whole lot of your brain is engaged. Yes. Whereas if you're focusing or concentrating or thinking, only a small section of it is. So it goes wider.
Mm-hmm. Oh, look, our resident philosopher is finally here.
Well, I was just going to say, what is a tree?
That's a very good question. What is a tree?
It's a bad idea to let into a stream. You should never let a tree in. Because
what is what?
A tree.
Or just what?
What is?
What is a what? Yeah,
no, just
depends on what the definition of is.
We can go even baser than that. Just what? Like nothing else. Just what?
What?
I feel like Macklemore is going to copy strike us eventually, because
you could
rhythmically evolve into that song.
Or you could do Kyle's mom. What?
What is that guy's name? Andrew. There's a guy that studies. He like gets monks and he gets them to meditate and stuff. He's trying to capture a spiritual experience in his CAT scan, and he's very agnostic when he talks about the mind and spirituality.
Well, let's see who wins that battle. The Loch Ness monster, or trying to capture a person in spirituality.
Yeah. Yes.
I have a poem about a tree. If anybody wants to hear it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Sure.
I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, who upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Excuse me, I'm cracking up. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. So that is not an atheist poem by any means, but still is pretty.
Yeah, but
I don't think you understand the purpose of the poem. It's clearly praying to tree Jesus.
okay, the tree that we have in chat is not that kind of tree, Scott. It's much worse than this.
It's not a poetic tree.
I wouldn't. Maybe many would, but I would not describe the tree that's here now as lovely.
I did want to add one more thing from
Leaky branches?
on the consciousness thing, that we've actually taken like something that somebody is thinking and been able to, like, if you're thinking of a screwdriver, we can hook your brain up to a computer, and without you ever even saying the word, just thinking about a screwdriver, the computer can say screwdriver. From Science Daily, quote, in a scientific first, Columbia neuroengineers have created a system that translates thought into intelligible, recognizable speech. By monitoring someone's brain activity, the technology can reconstruct the words a person hears with unprecedented clarity. This breakthrough, which harnesses the power of speech synthesizers and artificial intelligence, could lead to new ways for computers to communicate directly with the brain. It also lays groundwork for helping people who cannot speak, such as those living with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, or recovering from stroke, regain their ability to communicate with the outside world. So, like, we can actually measure what someone's thinking.
I mean, well, and so would it say screwdriver though, in whatever language the person's thoughts?
Well, whatever language the system is programmed to read it in. So, like, if this was being done in China, then the program would list it out in Chinese, or Mandarin Chinese.
Does that have anything to do with what? And I can't believe the guy's name's escaping me. The dude that just recently died in the past couple of years, that was in a wheelchair.
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking. Like, what was it that he had that was talking for him? Like, was
he had
it was a computer.
Yeah.
Computer. But it had a screen that was like, it was programmed to learn the patterns that he spoke with, and it was like that thing that you ever saw hanging off his glasses on his right side could pick up slight twitches in his cheek so that he could go, like, run through and select certain words, and it would use a really advanced form of predictive text so that it could kind of, like, you know, predict what he's saying and everything like that. I think it was, who developed that? Micros or IBM, or was it Intel? I don't know. I can't remember.
But yeah, did we repost my simplified argument so that you look it over and shit on it?
Well, I mean,
you
cleared it up for me, and as Speed said, I mean, you can't argue with the argument itself, except for the fact that you can find a million reasons to disagree with the conclusion.
Well, I mean, either there's something wrong with the premises or there's something unsound about the argument that negates the truth of the conclusion in that case.
Well, there's something wrong with the premises.
Yeah, I mean, because there's no, in an argument of this type, with, you know, on a subject of this type, can you really ever say whether it's completely accurate? Or, I mean, it's like an esoteric kind of subject. It's not, you know, you're not putting a syllogism down to, you know,
you believe. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's either two propositions that could be potentially incorrect. So
I would actually disagree with the first premise. I think physical objects can fail. There are objects that fail to become stars all the time. Jupiter is one of them.
Danny's gonna unmute right now. Nope. Oh God, my prediction failed.
Well, that's weird.
I predict that Danny is still sleeping it off from the other night.
Yeah, from the other night.
Nah.
Here he is.
To Adderall Danny's been using.
Here's Danny. Yeah, he ran out of Adderall.
Well, I know, and I noticed in the market the other day that Adderall stock really went through the roof because the supply is down.
Yeah.
Do y'all want to respond? Typically,
sure. I don't care.
You know,
it just doesn't seem right for you to be here and be so silent.
I don't know what it would mean for a star to fail if there's no standard.
Wait, there's no standard for what it means to be a star? Yes, there is.
We waited all this time for that.
And that standard is not met, and thus the thing is not a star. Like Jupiter failed to become a star; it failed to meet that standard of what a star is, i.e., the thermonuclear fusion reactions are taking place in the core of the
Yeah,
object.
that means there's an infinite amount of failure. Like you're a failure to be a tree or something.
Yeah, you're right. I am a failure to be a tree.
It just makes the term vacuous, because what failure on your view just means something it's not.
So Leo,
Not
can
really.
I ask you a question?
You're broadening the definition of failure to mean that, but that's not what I mean by it.
Well, if you're saying that a standard is just like understood in terms of some kind what X is, and then identifying some other object is not X.
Well, but let me clarify, because there's a point you're missing here, Danny. Is what Leo is saying without saying it, because he's assuming that we can understand, presuppose what he means by Jupiter failing to be a star, is that it started out going in the process of becoming a star, and along the way failed, and is now a gas giant instead of a star.
Why didn't it succeed to not becoming a star?
Probably because it didn't accrete enough matter to initiate nuclear fusion in its core.
No, I didn't ask that. I'm saying, why didn't it succeed to not be a star?
That makes no sense. Can you word that in a way that's not a double negative?
It did not become a star. That was successful.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
for
okay.
every other failure, there is a success of that failure, isn't there?
The point is that you're saying that it didn't become a star counts as both failure and success.
Well, yeah, just like if you are thirsty and you want to reach for a glass of water, but you can't reach it, you succeeded in failing to attain your goal.
I don't know. That's a contradiction.
No, it's not. You failed, which means that the failure was a success.
If you just understand success as just something like not failed, then you're saying
Well,
failed,
see, but that's
not
what you were
failed.
just doing. I was just taking what you were saying and applying it to different scenarios. So what's the difference?
Well, I think desires can fail. I don't think that when stars form, they fail. So if you take that example, something like the proposition that there's no star from some kind of prior set of conditions, the point is that that's going to underdetermine whether it should have formed that way.
I don't think so.
So
Leo,
Danny,
Leo.
I'm just wondering. You say that dualism is true, but that there is no God. But my inference is straightforward: that if there is dualism, which I believe, then there must be a God, because consciousness cannot emerge from matter. How would you answer to that?
I guess the idea is that non-material objects, if they exist, don't demand like some kind of a mind.
If they exist.
Well, you could imagine a universe where there's just like platonic objects and no minds.
Well, no, you said if non-material objects.
Yeah, something like minds. Look, the point is that I think that minds are contingent. So our minds didn't have to exist; they're not necessary.
I agree.
So the point
Danny,
is that
you sound like you're a quart low on Adderall.
yeah, I just woke up.
Okay.
From the other night.
Which other night?
By the way, Speed, check the private chat quickly.
Yeah. No, I just think that minds. If you're saying that if they're in a world where there are minds, that there's some kind of necessity with respect to what explains their existence, and that kind of is God for you. But I just think that I just see that as a just so story or something.
I can't even see what you're talking about, Leo.
Yeah.
I put what it is also in the private chat.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh shit.
All I have to do is read what he put in the private chat, and
We'll leave that to you, John.
huh?
Well, you're the rage whisperer. I'm the midnight whisperer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You really want to whisper to midnight? He might lose.
Yeah, I want to whisper sweet nothings to midnight.
Well, I mean, I just, I don't know how it all got started, but like I think I told Midnight earlier or yesterday or something. I thought that we had come to the determination, Midnight, that you were going to wait before you tried to,
Yeah.
but whatever. I can say I'm a rage whisperer, but that's not the case. You just got to let him finish it out and whatever.
Yeah, don't poke him right now, Midnight. Just leave him alone until.
Okay.
quiet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to. Never mind. We'll talk about it off air.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's really nothing to talk about. I mean, we had already determined what was going to happen, and you just, for some reason, you've decided to.
I mean, to be fair, he poked me. I just wanted to link in here.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's fine.
Let's handle it off air.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you admitted when we talked about this that you could see why he, would be mad. So can't really fault him for.
No, I don't fault him.
Yeah, this is the first time he saw you, so I had told you already that he had some words for you. So
yeah, that's fine. I can take a hit. I've took several, but go ahead. Atangelo, how you doing, buddy? Moving on.
Fine, thanks, and you.
No, I'm actually surprised he hasn't objected harder to my argument.
What up?
Well, so immutable. Can I try to understand it as how in the form that you put it in?
Yeah, sure.
That physical objects don't fail. They just there's a set of necessary and sufficient conditions that must be met for something to happen. If we're talking about just purely physical things, but if those necessary and sufficient conditions aren't met, that doesn't necessarily qualify for failure because
you froze.
I suppose.
So physical objects we don't usually think of as succeeding or failing because
right.
They don't have desires or intentions. So failure or success would be a teleological concept.
Yeah.
Good morning, Danny.
Good morning, Brenda. How are you?
I'm being naughty. I'm in here, and when I should be studying.
Oh, are you? We're in the same boat.
So glad the way that sentence ended.
But what I was going to say is
I can also be naughty in other ways.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of.
What I was going to say
naughty is
when
good.
it comes
Naughty is good.
from is my mic working?
Yeah, hold on a sec. I have
over you briefly.
I have
sorry, Leo.
When we're talking about desires and like failing to meet a desire, I would just say that the necessary and sufficient conditions haven't been met.
Yeah, I have a quick question for Brenda. Hello, Brenda?
I'm listening.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ask a question.
okay. It has nothing to do with conversation, but do you think Leo would look cute in a dress?
Oh God.
No. Nope.
We should really get off of that.
All right, sorry.
We can talk about Harry Styles in a dress because he actually wore one.
Well, let me tell you, Midnight's suggestion of you in a dress, I've gotten off several times on that.
Just wait till you see
keep
Shannon
that to yourself.
Let's raise her or not.
This could easily veer off into a very different subject matter.
Yeah,
and I
just
think
forget I brought it up.
I was content on these types of subjects being talked on his channel.
Oh, okay, whatever. Yeah, I don't care.
He is very trigger sensitive.
What's it? Okay.
Tutor food and drink.
Yeah, I have so many fucking problems with this argument that it would take a stream of it in its own. And the main thing, okay, immutable, when somebody said, oh, it's valid, what that means is that you've hashed it out in terms of symbolic logic and you found validity, right? And this isn't even like this has a contradiction right in the fucking premises.
Well, yeah, that's part of this
construction. And so how do you have a valid argument if there's a contradiction in the premises? I don't.
Wait, what's contradictory? I haven't seen it, but I don't.
The way that.
What are the two propositions that are contradictory?
That the mind can't fail and that it fails. And well, I guess no. I don't know. Fuck, it's
Wait,
been a while.
that's not the premise.
I just think minds failing means that whatever necessary and sufficient conditions for the success of satisfying one's desires were not met. No different than a planet can fail, and emphasis on the quote around that word, can fail to become a star in and of the fact that the necessary and sufficient conditions to be a star weren't met. There's no difference between those.
Hey,
The
Danny.
necessary and sufficient conditions in either instance were not met.
That just falls prey to the rule following paradox, Leo.
Which is what?
The idea is that for everything that happens, or that is happening, or has happened, will happen, that underdetermines what should happen.
That makes no sense to me. Can you like dumb that down like 50,000 notches, please?
Well, the point is,
that's the idea that theories are underdetermined. Scientific theories are underdetermined.
What the fuck? I don't know what it means to underdetermine something. I've never heard that word.
Very simple example.
I don't want an example. I want a definition.
Well, it's just the kind of thing, the kind of observation that's consistent with a myriad of hypotheses. That's basically the gist. But very quick example is that your car not starting underdetermines whether it's the battery or the spark plug.
Or purple fairies.
Yeah, I fail to see how what I said applies to, or how that applies to what I said.
The point is that if a star does not form, that doesn't get you to it should have formed or should have not formed.
Well, I wasn't speaking of whether it should or should not have.
Well, the idea is that those are that's the normativity for you.
Okay.
So when I make the claim, the point of the argument is to show that desires are normative in the same way.
Yeah, normative in that there's a norm or a standard establishing an ought.
Yes.
And that is a necessary and sufficient condition that wasn't met. That's why you failed.
The point is that there's necessary and sufficient conditions for a star forming and not forming, right?
Wait,
so there's a set of necessary and sufficient conditions for a star forming, as well as necessary and sufficient conditions for a star not forming.
Well, I would argue there is just for stars forming, and either it's met and they form and they become a star, or it's not met and they don't become a star.
Right, but in the case where they don't form, the star is not formed, the necessary and sufficient conditions for a star not forming have been met.
I think that's oversimplifying it, but sure.
Well, I'm curious, Danny, about the not forming. I mean, how can you have necessary conditions for something not happening?
That's what I'm saying.
That seems a little suspicious to me because of the not.
Well, 1 second. Yeah, so the point is that I just take a necessary condition for whatever you've observed might be like, well, it might be like the particles that you're observing or something. So when Leo was describing, let's say, preconditions that seem to suggest a star may or may not form, well, those are necessary conditions because, and they're not sufficient because those conditions, or whatever that kind of state is, may just form a star or may just not form a star.
Right. So the necessary conditions for star formation would be a dust cloud, right? You need a dust cloud and gravity, I suppose. We have to presuppose.
And accretion.
But a sufficient condition. But a sufficient condition for no star is just no matter.
Well, I really don't know what no stars means. I mean, that's. Can you really prove it? Can you really demonstrate a negative like that in that situation?
Well, I don't think there's a star right next to Earth, like in a mile away.
It's called the sun.
Yeah, a mile away though.
A mile away. Well, of course.
Little closer than a mile away, or else it'd be.
The point is that it's easy to prove that there's no star a mile away from Earth.
Well, yeah, it could be an invisible star.
I didn't want to get hung up on this too much. I wanted to try to dive into what Danny's saying a little more. So I have a desire to take Amelia Clark on a date. You would argue that's normative, correct?
Yeah.
So you would argue that in my mind, I ought to take Amelia Clark on a date.
Yes.
Okay, and now being within the vicinity of Amelia Clark physically would be a necessary and sufficient condition for meeting that ought, would it not?
It would be a necessary condition. What's the goal again?
To take her on a date, but in order to do that, I would have to be within her physical vicinity. And I'm not arguing it's the only one. But it
No,
is
I think
one,
that-
right? It is a necessary and sufficient condition.
Not really.
I don't
not
see how
really.
it can't be.
Well, the
Well, you
point
could
is,
have a long distance date.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not
I
talking about
think
I don't
we have
consider
a
long
date
distance
right now.
dates
We
but
have-
dates.
yet, remember, what translates to necessary and sufficient conditions.
At this
at least
point, I
in-
feel like we're just trivializing the words to make what I'm saying not true. To argue.
Well,
against.
let me just point out something, right? The idea of necessary and sufficient conditions just are basically the same thing as the truth conditions for something. And what I'm not saying there are truth conditions for success and failure, and there's also truth conditions for transitionary phases of physical states. But I mean, all we're saying there is something like, what is it that it takes for this proposition to be true?
Well,
And I would have to be in her vicinity for that proposition to be true.
I'm saying that you could apply
No,
those.
You could just be a stalker, and that's not a date.
Well, yeah, but then it wouldn't be a date, so I wouldn't be meeting that ought.
Yeah, but you would be close to her.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be meeting the ought. So
Right,
it wouldn't
so
be a necessary.
You have a
sufficient
desire.
for the
You have
ought.
a desire for me. You have a desire. I wish to be on a date with such person, and then you have to decide what constitutes a date, or what constitutes a date isn't simply being in physical proximity to somebody.
Well, yeah, I
It's that-
granted that. I said it's one
Yeah.
of the things that is
Right, so-
required for it.
Right. So as
And
soon
that's
as
what I'm saying. Is it one of the things required for that?
well,
I would argue
imagine-
it. I would argue it is, but I'm not around her, so that's a condition that hasn't been met. No different than some accreting mass not meeting the necessary and sufficient conditions for becoming a star. So I don't see how this makes the mind can fail, therefore it can't be physical. That makes absolutely no sense. Because in either instance, you have something that you want done, and you're just failing to meet the conditions for succeeding at it. That's all.
He's just defining mind in a teleological sense. So if under physicalism, you could possibly, this is like folk psychology, right, Danny? Desires are part of folk psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in modern the way we think of things, that like the Churchlands, for instance, don't think of desires as being, and folk psychology in general being real. Somebody likes
problem, folks. Like that was my problem with it, and I'd actually forgotten that phrase, folk psychology, and that would have been handy because this whole thing, you're bringing folk psychology to a naturalism fight.
So
you can't
like
fucking do that,
right? Like so, the Churchlands would say that their fate. I believe I have it right. I believe it was the Churchlands who decided to stop or to drop language of folk psychology and just talk about the underlying process. Instead of saying, I'm depressed today, they would say, my serotonin levels are low today.
Yeah, like Rorty's Antipodeans, basically. But it's kind of ridiculous that we would change our language. But are you familiar with Richard Rorty?
I cut my teeth on Richard Rorty. I've read a couple of his books several times, but it's been decades, so I could be very rusty about it.
But you remember the Antipodeans who live on the other side of the galaxy, just polar opposite of us, and they talk about all internal subjective states in terms of neuroscience. And he made a case, and there's been some back and forth on that, but I always consider myself an Antipodean. I always see everything fleshed out naturally. So when Danny says desire, I'm thinking brain states.
Yeah, so am I. Like desires are the result of things happening in the brain, like everything.
Brain states underdetermine normative facts.
So brain states could be thought of more as dispositions rather than desires, right? Isn't that correct, Danny?
Yeah, that's another way of putting it.
So dispositions would be more physicalist than the normative statement of saying desires, right?
Yeah, and I use disposition shorthand, but there is like the scientific notion of dispositions, like causal dispositions, and then like you have like other sorts of dispositions, like moral dispositions that virtue ethicists want to forward. And I'm not talking about that, but the idea.
I'm sorry. I thought there was a pause, and I went for it. I'm sorry.
No. Like just fragility is a good example of a causal disposition that glass has sort of. If it shatters, that part of what explains why it shattered is that it was causally disposed to shattering. No one would say that it intended to shatter.
Right. Just like no one. Yeah. So unlike steel, which under the same forces wouldn't shatter because it's of its makeup.
Well,
Right.
yeah,
It isn't disposed to shatter under the same conditions that glass would shatter.
So I was AFK for a while. Are you guys talking about 9/11?
No.
Oh, all right.
Okay, so under physicalism, Danny, I could have, for instance, I would say that I have, if I'm thirsty, I would say that I have a desire to quench my thirst. But under physicalism, it'd be more accurate to say, you know, my hypothalamus has detected low numbers in some chemical that indicates that that I need hydration, and it has created in me a impetus to seek out water to drink. So that would all be dispensational, right? Those would all be dispensations. There's no desires from the chain of my blood serum levels are low in water, which has a causal chain up to my brain. I believe it's the hypothalamus that would then create the neural signals or activate certain neural pathways that would cause me to seek out water. And those are all dispensations. There's no desires in there, right?
Well, think about how we derive an ought. Okay, if I derive an ought, let's say from P proposition, I think I agree. Like I said, I agree with Hume that how I managed to derive that ought is there's some concept in that proposition that already contains an ought. So the problem is that when I make descriptions about my body, like, I have certain dopamine levels or serotonin levels, or my hypothalamus is a certain way, or I have this particular physiological state, that doesn't contain any oughts.
Right,
so
right. I agree.
So, right. So if it's the case that you should drink water, okay, if that's been inferred in some kind of way, you cannot make the inference from any bodily state. You can only make the inference from the normative state, the desire to drink water.
Right. So I just have a dispensation to drink water when my blood serum levels are low in water, and that's just there's a mechanism underlying that, and it's simply a mistake on my part to give that a normative value, right?
Yeah, the way you phrased it there is just something like, you behaved in a certain way. We didn't involve anything like desires and intentions, right? So if you were disposed in a way where, let's say the water spilled, there wouldn't be a fact of the matter as to whether that was what should have happened or should have not happened.
Right. So desires are just mistakes. They're part of. That's what the Churchlands would say, is that desires are part of the mistaken folk psychology, which attributes normative claims like I desire a glass of water.
Yeah, they want to reject all that kind of language.
Yeah, to what is actually there's an underlying physical process which has no normative parts to it. It's all dispensational. It's all I'm just disposed to seek out water.
I think that most of neuroscience would agree that that's fundamentally what desires are. Like there are mental disorders that lead people to like not have desires, and thus their ability to make decisions is pretty much grinds to a halt. So like we know that having desires is entirely a physical process in the brain.
Having these dispensations that we mistake for desires is because the organism would fail, and if you had an entire species that didn't recognize any kind of or didn't respond to the need to drink water, they would die out because they wouldn't hydrate themselves, and they would go extinct, right? So it's simply It's simply a part of survival. But that's not it's not that they ought to have survived. It's just
right. Yeah, the idea is that there's an open question in terms of whether a thing persists in existence or doesn't.
Right.
Right. And
there's what Brenda just said. I want to ask you guys a question. Is like, so what is going on then? Like, because we've all heard before, like where somebody not intentionally, but for some reason they didn't seek out water, like people that become dehydrated and don't listen to those signals that are going on in the brain. Like what happens? What's happening there?
Well, we would call that a pathology, right? Because we think it's normative to seek out water because we think that we ought to survive, but the universe doesn't care whether or not we survive or not, whether we drink water or not, right? We would just call that a pathology. There's something wrong with that person, but that their underlying mechanism that causes them to seek water when they're thirsty has somehow been disrupted. But we would attach normative terms to that. We would say that they are diseased, or they are there is something wrong. Maybe they are infected, or maybe they have some kind of congenital condition, or maybe they drank or consumed something that interfered with the biochemical signals that signal to the brain that the body is thirsty. But none of those are all just physical events that have no normative quality to them. They could, am I getting it right?
Do you guys see what's on the screen here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they found a session. They can stimulate this session. They can make a animal drink whether he needs water or not. And so they're kind of unwilling.
We can literally go in somebody's brain and stimulate what we would call desires. Like give them desires, things that they might not have ever desired on their own. Like desires are physical.
I can do that to you right now.
Yeah, right.
You can't make me not desire Amelia Clark.
I'm gonna get really scared, Danny, if you turn your camera on right now. So.
Well, the point that Danny is making, as I understand it, is that it's a mistake to call those desires. Those are dispensations.
Yeah,
but I'm sorry. I'm using the wrong word. My bad. It's not dispensation. It's disposition.
Can I finish talking about my diagram, please? Okay.
Okay.
So, look, can please? I just want to say one quick thing is, to me, as the novice in the room, when you say, like Leo just said, you can go to a certain part of the brain and stimulate it and make a person, for lack of a better term, desire something, even things they might not normally desire. That to me right there shows that it's kind of like what Brenda and Danny were saying, that it's not a desire, that it is like, Brenda talked about this causal link, that leads up to the brain that turns into the thirst for water. And exactly. Then that to me, that's not a desire. That's just like,
okay.
Nowhere in the causal chain are there any
desires don't exist.
Basically, yeah. That's what I would say.
I would agree with that, but
okay, let me finish. Okay, guys. I mean, you go to John and we let John finish, and then you guys start talking. Okay, let one person finish what they're saying. Okay, so from these these central regions of the brain, what happens is they're kind of like juice squirters. When one of these fire, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor? So basically, what happens is it sends projections up to the cortex, and in the cortex are all sorts of things that you've learned over the course of your life about water and about obtaining water and all of that. And it's where this neurotransmitter goes up to the cortex and turns into the beginning of a desire. But then what happens is it feeds back down into this limbic region and it amplifies that. And then it goes back up again and it becomes sort of a circuit. And Antonio Damasio has done a lot of work on explaining how a desire happens. He makes a distinction between feelings and emotions. he would call the need for water an emotion, and he would call a feeling what happens when the cortex starts filling it in. So what Danny's talking about with desires are all up in that cortical part where we've learned things. Okay.
I mean, the point is that
I apologize for muting you guys, but Jesus Christ, I like to be able to say something once in a while. Go on.
The point is that there's empirical equivalence between physicalism and dualism.
Well, all I have to do, though, is simply embrace eliminative materialism and simply say there are no desires.
I think that you're also committed to saying there are no beliefs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good move, Brenda.
That means that, but that's self-defeating.
I don't see how.
Those words have a colloquial meaning. Like when people talk about their desires, they're just really talking about their dispositions. We use the word desire to argue that, well, it's physical. Well, nope, then that's just not a desire. To me, is no different than when creationists pull out something. Well, this is irreducibly complex. Well, it's actually not. Oh, well, then that was never. But it's just moving the goalposts back and back and back and back to try to get at this idea that desires can't ever be physical when we've already shown that they are.
No, I'm saying that the physical facts underdetermine whether there's a desire.
I don't think so.
Well,
I know that you disagree, Leo.
I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, it's not that I disagree. It's that literally the data shows that you're just fucking wrong.
I can grant all the data.
Okay, so you're wrong. Okay, awesome. We're done.
Okay.
Okay,
Leo, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about this stuff.
I just don't
embrace
like
eliminative material.
Eliminative
material. Embrace the Churchlands.
I'm not a materialist. I'm a physicalist.
I do like the Churchlands. So you like the Churchlands?
I follow. What's her name? Patricia on Twitter.
Yeah. Did you read her book on neurophilosophy?
No, I got so many fucking books. I should be reading right now for my class.
Okay, she has a wonderful book called Neurophilosophy, and it's really a good read. She covers a lot of area.
You should see her go into it with the panpsychics on Twitter. She lays into it.
People really hate the Churchlands. I mean, they're like this is Satan, you know?
Pretty much, yeah.
Because they boil it down to simple, pretty simple reality. So,
well, that simply just might be what is left is that you have to embrace eliminativist speeches or talk or rhetoric.
Yeah, I call it God's eye view. If you're a physicalist and you're a naturalist, then you go right out and you embrace the entire thing. So, and if there's anything that's contradictory or can't be fleshed out in that realm, then you have a contradiction. Then you have to back up. But so far, I have found nothing.
Hey, real quick, so with everything that you guys have been talking about desires, because I have a question on a similar topic, but maybe they're synonymous. So I don't want to ask the question if they are synonymous. When you talk about desires,
John, let me do a bit of moderation. I'm going to step out and get the mail. I'm going to let the stream run as long as you guys want to talk today. So, okay.
And so my question is, are desires synonymous with wants?
I would say so.
Yeah, they're both normative too.
Okay, all right. So because the idea is like you can't. I've always heard and agreed with the logic behind it that you can't choose your wants. So if desires and wants are synonymous, well, then it sounds like the same thing is going on. What you guys have been talking about for like the last 20 minutes is that the reason that you can't choose your wants is because it is this like causal link of physical effects in your body that result in those wants.
Well, I think it's more tricky than that, but there are certainly desires that are not intentional, and in that sense, they're not chosen. But when you make a choice, though, that involves maybe the desire that you have.
I'll be right back.
So it's not one that you intentionally had. So, like, I could have a desire to eat cake and acknowledge that that wasn't intentional. I just kind of looked at the cake and had it formed a desire. I didn't choose to form the desire by looking at it. At least we can stipulate that. But if I choose to eat it, right? What explains my
Well, that's a different subject than
exactly.
wanting. Yeah.
Well, no, but if you choose to eat it, that what explains that is going to be your desire to eat it, if it's a choice.
Well, right, but you step back from that, the eating it part. Where have you actually made a decision that you want it, though?
No, we agree, right? So there's like two events here, right? That one is the formation of the desire. That might not be a choice. That might not be intentional. But then there's the separate event of choosing to eat it. And that requires a desire to eat it. So the idea is that when you act to eat in a way where you eat the cake, that's distinguished, that's understood as a choice. Whereas the desire that explains your choice might not be a choice itself in terms of how it came about.
Stephanie Tretton, I don't think that's true. I don't think want and greed are synonymous.
What?
That's too simplified to say want is greed.
Yeah, no. What? I'm not even. No, just no. You ever hear something that's so stupid it gives you Forrest Whitaker eye? Because that did it.
Forrest Whitaker eye.
Yeah, where your eye just goes like, hey, what the fuck?
Jesus.
That could also be a stroke, so consult your physician. Just go see your doctor.
And especially
I'm good. I'm not going to have a stroke.
If you smell toast or taste pennies. So, Brenda.
I think she stepped away for a second.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, keep slapping Danny around. It was fun.
I just wanted to say I do like philosophy. I have a great respect for it, but there are times, and I'm not necessarily ascribing this to anybody in the room, but there are times I do think it inserts itself into places where it's hard to say where it doesn't belong because you can turn anything into a philosophy, but where it doesn't have the utility that people might think that it does.
I mean, who was it that was here the other day? Oh, somebody was here the other day that was philosophically minded and said something that about there's no set answers. I mean, there's set terminology and set ideas in philosophy, but none of the answers really are set, as far as everybody can have a different way of looking at it.
I don't think that I was like, quote unquote, slapping Danny around. I wouldn't do that.
I was
okay.
being a jerk. I
was being
I'm actually
jabbing at Danny.
Okay, I'm actually confirming what he says. What he says is correct. The desires, beliefs and desires are normative.
Well,
the only
agree
way,
with that.
the only way for the
makes it not
physicalist,
mental.
right? The only way for the physicalist to respond to this line of argument is simply to embrace a limitivist materialism, which is, I'm just taking it broadly as encompassing materialism and physicalism and naturalism, saying that the universe doesn't contain beliefs, desires, and other normative claims. It's just, those are just the names that we mistakenly give for an underlying process to the human brain, which is entirely a material and non-teleological, but we attribute teleology to them mistakenly. But
so, quick question, Brenda: are you a physicalist or not?
Yeah, I would count myself as possibly, I don't have it's not all well thought out for me, because right now I should be reading John Locke, and we just got done reading Descartes. And so I'm pretty far down the chain before we get to modern philosophy yet. But I think that the material world is all there is, and you could say naturalism is what most people say today, because there's shortcomings to saying everything is physical and everything is a material, because just say everything is natural, because then that
So-
encompasses things like fields and other physical entities that don't have mass. They aren't like stuff. Light isn't really.
That's where I draw the distinction between like material and physical, whereby a quantum field not being constructed of matter is thereby not material, but it is defined by physical quantities. It has a tangible effect in reality. So I would still call it physical, but I wouldn't call it material. And I take a position that other physicalists I know of don't necessarily hold to, where I think that the mind is immaterial. That there isn't a particle of mind. It's not made of matter, but it is physical. In that it is a property that emerges out of matter, but itself isn't made of it.
Right. It's part of the natural world, which is why what people mean when they say I'm a naturalist. It means I don't believe in spooky spirit stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I mean. There's people that believe all kinds of strange things.
Brenda, have you ever engaged? And just to clarify, like when Leo kind of nailed it on the head, I was just like taking a shot at Danny when I said that. What you?
Oh, okay. I like Danny. Danny's
we do too, but we give him
right. And wait a minute. Part of my clarification is the reason I said that is it was just my dumbass way of saying that your guys' conversation was fascinating. You know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
well, this is
enjoyable. And that's why Speed, decided, hey, we're just going to keep going here.
Well, this is.
But real quick, here's my question: is have you ever engaged Danny on his argument that naturalism is incoherent?
Not
this
really.
is argument on that. Or at least one of them.
Not really, because I feel unequipped to fully argue that.
Okay.
I don't think I think we've talked about it.
No,
a little bit, but I don't feel like
back in the day, Brenda. Back in the day.
Yeah, but from that, I don't feel like I'd really be equipped right now. But someday I'm coming for you, Danny.
Come and get me.
Someday.
Well, I thought that the argument we were
covering.
I thought the argument we were just covering was his argument against naturalism, that desires are normative and that normativity is non-natural, so desires are non-natural.
There's the ontological category argument where, like, if you only create one ontology, the whatever kind of term that you've used to describe that quantity is going to be vacuous. So, like, I think I've said this, right? Something like if every object is natural, then to say an object is natural is to say an object is an object.
I don't agree with that.
Well,
that straightforwardly follows.
I listened to your conversation with Doug. With Doug the other night. I listened to it last night.
Yeah.
And he was making the point that it wasn't what you say superfluous for him to say natural object because you didn't believe in just natural objects. So it was informative because that's his, there's a distinction. If you have two people who disagree on something, I say there's nothing but natural objects exist. So if I say natural object, that's a tautology, is just saying the same thing over again. That's correct. But if I'm in a room and I'm talking to somebody else who believes that there are natural objects and non-natural objects, then in order to refer to something, I have to indicate to them that I'm talking about just natural things. And so then I can say natural object.
I just think that at that point, they don't know what I mean.
No, but they're indicating to you what they mean. They're indicating.
I make up some term, like there are gazooking things and non-gazooking.
Gazorpazorps?
Yeah, if there are gazorpazorps and not gazorpazorps, rather than saying, well, they're only gazorpazorps, I would just be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, but you believe that gazorps are this other thing.
What I would say is that to say something is natural is to say that it is an object, and to say that something is an object is to say that it's natural, and I don't see a problem with that. But if you say something is a natural object, then, like Brenda said, that would be a tautology.
Well, what do you think is beyond simply the natural world as we understand it currently?
You asking me or Danny?
Yeah, man, that matters greatly who you're asking.
Either one of you, I suppose. Since
I would say that like beyond or above or transcendent to the natural world is as incoherent as saying north of the North Pole.
Okay, so but that's because if you understand natural as like any object, for saying something that's not natural, that's just understand as not an object.
What do you understand there to be?
Myself?
Me?
Or yeah.
Danny, what do you understand that there is? Just natural. You don't believe that there are only the physical universe as we understand it. Then what is it? What else is it that you believe?
Well, I think they're abstract objects. I think they're mental states, and I think they're value.
Yeah, you're a Neoplatonist, I think you said.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, don't you think that that could be just an abstract realm invented by humans that emerges out of the physical world and so could just be reduced to it?
Well, presumably in a world we could still predicate truths in a world where there are no minds.
Yeah, but Danny, you don't believe that abstracta have causal properties, so they can't be behind our desires.
Right. I don't think that abstracta explain anything.
Right. So what does explain the mind?
Oh, I'm not so sure.
I did want to answer something, well, not really a question, but a statement that Lena Powell made in the side chat. She said, light and other massless particles and fields are a part of matter in general relativity and cosmology. Well, number one, general relativity and cosmology don't deal with these things. Quantum field theory does. And in quantum field theory, elementary bosons are not considered matter particles. Now, you can have two fermions that make up what are called composite bosons that would be matter because fermions are matter particles, bosons are not matter particles. So bosons are not considered matter, and since light is carried by the photon, and the photon is a boson, light is not matter, it's considered radiation. Also, quantum fields are what matter comes from, but it's not itself made up of the things in it.
What are quantum fields made of?
Nothing. It's hard. When I say nothing, I mean it's not like there's something called nothing and that's what makes it up. It's that they're made up of not anything. But they're not abstract. This is why I say they're not material, but they're physical. We've actually measured these fields, but they're not made up of some, like, you couldn't get it like you can break a table down and say, well, this is an atom, this is what makes up the table, but you can't do the same thing with a quantum field. You can't break it down into something smaller.
They're made of hyperdimensional bends in space.
What?
No.
I think so. I think that's probably how it's going to work out.
They could be made up of something, but none of the data suggests that they are.
Do you think that eventually we'll discover that there's an underlying structure or thing which fields are made of?
I don't think so, no. But
that's what I'm saying,
I could be wrong.
They're going to figure out something about space that ends up folding into these fields, that ends up being these fields. It's going to be something like the way gravity bends space.
That doesn't make sense.
Pretty esoteric. Really esoteric.
If you really understand what I'm talking
this is
about.
way above my pay grade.
Well, space isn't thought to be fundamental like quantum fields are, because space doesn't matter to quantum fields. Time does, but space doesn't. Space is likely emergent. Time.
I'm not talking about those 3 dimensions, Leo.
Well, then you're not talking about space.
Well, time is a consequence of causality, right?
No, time is like in quantum mechanics, time is a property like position or momentum or spin or something like that. Time is probably fundamental. It might be emergent, but probably not, because time is still important in quantum mechanics and quantum field theory. Space, we don't really talk about space in quantum mechanics. Space is kind of just an afterthought. It doesn't mean anything, and that's why a lot of theoretical physicists think space is emergent.
I think CRISPR has it right.
Christopher's got it. We got the answer. That's a good one.
So Danny and I come from a group of people that I have sort of not been around a whole lot lately. That they're very and they're very much in the analytic philosophy tradition, and so we're accustomed to that. And the sciencey people that are on YouTube here are very different because you're more concerned with evidential arguments, and they were concerned more with conceptual arguments in the analytic tradition.
And that doesn't apply to me, Brenda, because I love the analysis. I love doing an inter-theoretic analysis between that folk psychology world and the physical. So inter-theoretic. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be analytical. But when you're analytical only within the realm of folk psychology, I'm not sure if you can get anywhere.
Well,
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know.
I like continental philosophy. Maybe I'm out of bounds here. Pretty much just means nothing to me. I focus on analytic philosophy, but I don't. Go ahead.
The analytic tradition is separate from the continental position.
Yeah.
And
isn't the analytic discipline kind of the prominent one in the modern age?
Came from British empiricism and pragmatism in America and
Yeah.
stuff. But that's history. Today, there's sort of a blending between both.
Frege, Bertrand Russell, more Whitehead. I think more Whitehead. They're like all like some of the fathers of analytic philosophy.
And Whitehead was not a materialist. He was an idealist.
Yeah, I've never.
What it means is the approach to philosophy that people take. It's more analytic, and what gave rise to the analysis of language from Wittgenstein and the philosophy of language. But since then, there's been more cross-pollination since then, and things go. Feuerbach, I never know how to say his name. Feuerbach, and other German philosophers whose names begin with H. And all of those, they've been, people.
Husserl, Heidegger, and the other H. What the hell is it?
Hegel.
Hegel, yeah. Husserl, Heidegger. I call them the three H's. They're in phenomenology. Is that what you're talking about? Those guys, or somebody?
Yeah, there's a sort of a break between phenomenology and analytic philosophy.
I can never remember Hegel. I can never remember the third H.
Good old Hegel.
Speed, who is it that's in here now that stole my name?
Nobody stole your name. Who stole your name?
Yeah, somebody called themselves Hyena number 4, man. I'm Hyena number 4.
Yeah, but you gotta Nathan Art is.
Yep.
He's actually you've been promoted to number 3 now because Scott is number 2, and Scott is number 1 hyena. You're number 2, John. And Nathan, you're number. We got to keep these fucking numbers. I'm master hyena. I'm master hyena. Leo was hyena number 2. I don't know. I fucking forgot. I'm old.
Yeah, I'm of course just joking, and I'm just honored to be a hyena, and I don't need to have a special.
We got to hand out hyena like name tags at the door.
So we're the hyenas. So does that make Danny the lion?
No, I'm a lion.
Well, no, I'm saying you are the lion, but does that make Danny the lion that the hyenas rip apart?
No, Danny is literally a hyena. We're demonic hyenas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Literally. Dude, I can't tell you how many times fucking Maddox said that in our debate. Literally.
Or context or premise.
Danny likes him.
Oh, he loves it. He well,
I don't fault him for that. They get along.
There's something deeper going on there than intellectual.
I would have no idea, but all I know is what Danny's told me.
Yeah.
So I like Danny, and even though he's crazy, but whatever.
I'll admit to that off there.
So do you think that there's like some deep love going on between Maddox and Danny?
I suspect something's going on there.
Well, on physicalism, there's no such thing as love.
Oh fuck!
Yes, there
That's
is.
why we love you, Danny.
That would be.
You keep us honest. He keeps us honest. He gets us to think.
I think that's true, and I think that's good. I think that what Danny is doing is and Pogan also is generally a good thing. You guys haven't met Pogan yet, have you?
Oh, I just watched one of his videos the other day, and I love that man.
Okay.
Hogan. I only know that name from Discord.
Yeah, Pogan.
He did put a video out the other day where he was analyzing Garth Dawkins.
Darth.
Give me a link. Does he have a YouTube channel?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's it called? Hogan?
Pogan.
Pogan.
What are his theological and political dispositions?
Well, before anybody answers that, I wanted to say here a minute ago on something that Brenda had complimented Danny, and I just wanted to say most of the time when I think of Danny or whatever I'm feeling when I'm engaging with Danny, honesty isn't like the one thing I would think of.
What? Danny's very honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying he's dishonest, but I'm just saying when I think Danny, that's not the first word that comes to my mind.
Okay.
I'm going to be honest. The first word that comes to my mind when I think of Danny is analytic. Maybe a little bit too much, but can you ever really be too analytic? I mean, really?
I put a link to the latest video by Pogan in the chat.
Are you talking about Tom, that rabbit guy?
No.
Tom Rabbit? Yeah, Tom's a good guy.
So real quick,
okay, but what about Pogan?
I never got an answer to my question.
Can we straighten this out first?
I want to. You talked about how analytical Danny is, and I would agree with that. But think back to the disagreements that most of us in this room have had with Danny. I don't think those came out of Danny being too analytic. I mean,
I haven't been watching those. I've been doing other things.
So what are Pogan's theological and political dispositions?
I would imagine he's an atheist, as far as his politics, I don't actually know.
He fluctuates. I think he's something like, I hate capitalism right now.
Okay.
I mean, you said you put his latest in. Oh, you put it in the side chat. I thought you meant private. Yeah. Okay.
No.
And is this the one I referred to? Or
no, it's a different one. It's a more recent one.
Oh, okay.
It's
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Vaush Biden and voting for socialism. Analyzing.
It's actually pronounced Voosh for everybody. It's Voosh or Vwish.
No,
it can be Vuvuzela if you want it, but it's Vosh. He was in a panel with a bunch of people. One of them was Lecture Fan. I don't know if anybody knows that guy, but that guy is fucking. He's hilariously stupid, and I'm just being honest. And the guy who was hosting the panel was like, "All right, so Vosh, introduce yourself." And he's just like, "Yeah, so by the way, it's Vaush because everybody calls him Vaush." And then later he said, "No, it's Voosh," and it was just a funny joke. But he does that all the fucking time.
Yeah,
what was I gonna say?
Recently, and then David was saying his name wrong if it's Voosh.
But Danny, you did say that we are foregoing math today for next week, correct?
Right.
Okay.
The reason why I'm barely engaging is I'm right now writing my paper.
All right. Is this like a thesis or?
Well, it's 20 pages, but
like for college, is it like a graduate thesis?
Yeah, it's my graduate. Yeah, I'm writing on.
What are you writing on?
Yeah. A lot. I'm writing on some basically the center. It's a lot of stuff, but basically it centers around virtue ethics. But I'm using Nietzsche and Kant to like compare and contrast. Like so. The point is that like typically there's like this like choice between like something like accepting principles or like some kind of outwardly principles like the categorical imperative or Kant's moral philosophy, or maybe some kind of like utilitarian.
I'd like to add something whenever I can.
Yeah, and so or the idea is that you're committed to something like a subjectivist view, like what the conditions in which I should do something just simply revolves around certain psychological facts about myself. And so what virtue ethicists try to do is they try to present an alternative to the two. But there's like, the point is that one way you can respond is by, number one, showing that, okay, Kant's view reduces down to something like an objectivist view. Some standard theories of moral relativism reduced to like, subjectivist view, and that's taken to be a true dichotomy. So if virtue ethics doesn't fit in either, then it's incoherent. Or it tries to distinguish itself and it just collapses into one side of the dichotomy. And I think that's what I'm arguing, essentially.
If I really cared about you, Danny, I'd boot you out of here right now so you can work on your damn paper.
I'm gonna be finished.
My question: you quantified your paper that you're writing by saying it's 20 pages. I mean, how does that tell us anything? I mean, what do you mean when you say page?
Oh, he doesn't have any meaning. He doesn't. Those things don't.
It's not
exist.
a fact of the matter as to what the sounds mean. And
Okay.
That wasn't funny. Okay. All right.
I mean, I think maybe we've all been hanging on you for much.
That was kind of funny.
No, I should be
Yeah,
going
sort of.
because I have things to do too. Also.
Yeah, we could wrap up, guys, and let Danny get to his
myself.
paper. And
right.
I got to go call midnight.
Later.
So, okay, bye.
So
y'all want to wrap up
Sure.
so I can go eat my wieners?
Sure.
oh man, double jointed.
I fried some wieners. Wieners.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you had to go eat your wiener. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll talk later, John. Okay. So should we end the broadcast, guys?
Sure.
Okay.
Just send me $20 and you can get it.
It's in the mail. Don't worry. Okay. Ending broadcast. Goodbye.
Oh, wait, real quick. Thursday night on The Rage. Rage is going to debate C.J. Cox. Was the biblical flood moral?
Right. And Bill Morgan currently has something going on called, what the fuck is it called? Hang on a second. Bill Morgan, Angry Atheist confronts Bill Morgan on God's existence. So that's happening soon, I think. Yeah, maybe now. Who knows? Anyway, goodbye, cruel world. And Leo wants to say,
Remember, folks, science doesn't have all the answers, but religion has none of them.
yep. Bye, children.